All right, hey people, today is November 23rd, 2025. I'm Chris Lucas. Um, today I don't really know what I'm going to talk about because it's like things got kind of frustrating at the last minute for me. That's when my show's about 15 minutes late getting started. It's like I had sound issues um, and plus I got to go to work pretty like in about an hour, so start getting ready. Um, so I guess I'm just gonna just talk and let it go because I didn't want people to see me starting a show, scheduling a show, and then canceling it again. Um, but just some things I was thinking about recently was that I hear a lot of once saved, always saved debates, right? And for a new Christian, what a base or anyone that's trying to figure out, because you could be a Christian for 20 years still trying to figure this out after hearing all these different people debate. And if you just want to get it kind of simplified as to like how to start narrowing down what you should believe, I would say it all probably comes the best way to narrow down a once saved, always saved argument is or eternal security, whatever. To me, some of these words really don't have much meaning to them because just because someone says they preach eternal security, like I have my doubts as to what that even means to the person. um because like what if someone starts another religion and they preach eternal security, like, yeah, hey, we got once saved, always saved, Jesus, and they put Jesus in there somehow, and all this other stuff, and I don't even know if that religion can save you, right? If it's based on a Jesus that's not even biblical. And I guess that's one of the things I've kind of always thought about my entire life is that, and like I said, I could be wrong. I'm just trying to narrow it down so other people can figure out the issue for themselves. And I think the best way to do it is to look at the parable of the sower and the seed in Matthew 13. And the reason why I say that is these words are pretty clear in the Greek that all these people truly believed. And that word's the same as far as what I understand. Did have some notes on it if I can find them. See if I can even find these notes in here. Oh, that's great. The search option's not working. Yeah, there's like some Greek word like pistuos and proskeiron, meaning they truly believed. Um, and as far as I know, that word's the same in every single chapter. I mean, like the word belief, like you can't. There's no way to say that these people didn't actually believe, is what I'm basically saying. I'm not going to get into all the Greek and everything. I just don't have my notes organized enough to even start to get that deep into it. But basically, there are some people who teach this thing called once saved, always saved. And they'll say that, um, now, let me see if I can even simplify it even more. Basically, I think it comes down to if you really believe in like a one moment in belief, you're saved forever no matter what, right? Can't fall away. You can never lose salvation. Uh, basically believe the only consistent interpretation, if you want to believe that, would be this doctrine called free grace, which I actually debated a guy. I didn't debate him on free grace and once saved, always saved, but the guy I recently debated on standing for truth, Charles Jennings, runs a channel that's basically, he dedicates to free grace. And the reason I even heard of free grace was because of him, because he once said something that a lot of people who didn't know what free grace was, they were shocked by it. Because he says, yeah, all you got to do is believe one moment in time and you're saved forever. And he goes, and yeah, you could even worship Satan, but as long as you believed in Jesus one moment in time, sincerely believed in Jesus one moment in time, you're saved forever. And I believe that if you're gonna believe in this thing called once saved, always saved, um, that that's the only consistent belief. And the reason why I say that is strictly due to this parable of the sower and the seed, because in this, it says that all these people truly believed. There's no person. You see, some people will say, oh, only the last group believes. So you do have some once saved, always saved people that will claim only the last group is truly saved. And they will say, like, the other two groups didn't really believe. And that's how they reconcile these other passages that are warning passages. They go, oh yeah, those people, are heading to hell, but and it looks like they didn't believe, but they just weren't true believers. And I got issues with that, because that word looks when you look into the Greek, it looks like they truly believed. So that's why sometimes when you hear, like, someone who's in free grace, they tend to believe in dispensationalism also, and that way it helps them compartmentalize these verses and make these verses that seem like warning passages apply to something else. Now, a lot of people will say that's crazy, and then they'll try to come up with all these other inconsistent views, but they're coming up with these inconsistent views, and I feel like they're not really being honest with the Greek text. So that's why I say it comes down to the parable of the sower and the seed. Um, because look, I'll kind of read through it, and then I'm going to give a few comments about it. So on that day, Jesus gone out of the house and was sitting by the sea, and a large crowds gathered to him. So he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd was standing on the beach. And he told them many parables, um, saying, "Behold, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell by the road, and the birds came up and ate them. The others fell on rocky places where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up immediately because they had no depth of soil. Um, but after the sun rose, they were scorched because they had no root, and so they withered away. Others fell among the thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them. But the others fell on good soil and yielded a crop, and some 100, some 60, some 30 times as much. The one who has ears, let them hear." So, me personally, I say only that last group saved. But there are some once saved, always saved people that will say that last group was saved too, but that's kind of being inconsistent with the entire text, because the text is saying these other people, they definitely believe. If you, as we read on, you can't say, oh no, only the first group didn't believe, and you can't say the two middle groups. So you got the first one that's on the it fell on the roadside, and the birds came up and ate it. The others fell in rocky places where they didn't have much soil. So the ones that fell in rocky places that didn't have much soil and immediately sprang up immediately, those are believers. And the others that fell on thorns and the thorns came up and choked them, those are believers. The Greek definitely makes that obvious. So and the third group is definitely believers. So the second and third group, sometimes OSAS, or once saved, always saved, they'll say, oh, weren't real true believers. The only people I know that are consistently interpreting this correctly would be the free grace that says only the first group's not saved. The other three are definitely and they would say the other three, since they had a moment of belief, and it was sincere, and they definitely believed, then, and it's sincere as far as I understand the Greek, right? So so you would have those groups all believe, and so now this starts to get into conversations like basically, um to really narrow this down, if you believe someone can apostatize and still be saved, then you believe in once saved, always saved. If you reject that, you don't believe in once saved, always saved. Now, I do believe in eternal security because people will say, oh, Chris doesn't believe in eternal security. Well, actually, I believe, me personally, I think I'm the only, anyone who holds the type of belief I have are the only ones who believe in eternal security, because I believe in eternal security in Christ, right? So this is the big difference between me and some other people, because the people that, in my opinion, that teach free grace, that's you have eternal security outside of Christ, right? Because you're not abiding, you're apostatizing. So therefore, you're teaching that people have eternal security, not in Christ, but it's all based on that one moment of belief, right? But you're clearly outside of Christ, because that's what all the outer darkness verses um are about, when it's like, oh, you'll be cast into outer darkness. I was listening to some free grace dispensationalists last night on a show, and they were saying that, oh, the outer darkness, that's not hell. That just means you're outside of the millennial reign of Christ, like you're outside the kingdom, but that's only for 1,000 years, and that that's not like a permanent thing. So you see them doing these odd things like that. And to me, when I see outer darkness, just logically, I think to myself, God is light. So if you're in darkness, you're outside of the presence of God. And to me, that does not sound like you're saved. And I'm not going to get real deep into that, but that I'll just, put that out there. Outer darkness, my mind says God is light. So you're outside of God and you're outside the kingdom. That's just what it sounds like to me. But anyway, I'm going to read on. An explanation for the parables. The disciples came up to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? And Jesus answered them, to you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom, but to them it has not been granted. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, you keep on listening, but you shall not understand. And you keep on looking, but you shall not perceive. For the heart of the people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their ears, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So the sower explained. So I gave my explanation. We're going to hear Jesus give his. Listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is the one sown with the seed beside the road. The one sown with seed on rocky places, this is the one who hears the word immediately and receives it with joy. So it looks like they really believed, because they hear it immediately and they receive it with joy, yet has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary. And when affliction or persecution occurs because of the word, immediately he falls away. And the one sown with seed among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, and the anxiety of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. But the one sown with seed on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and produces some 100, some 60, and some 30 times as much. So Jesus presented another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and left. And when the wheat sprouted and produced again, the weeds also became evident. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. And the slaves said to him, Do you want us to go? Do you want us to then to go and gather them up? But he said, No, while you are gathering up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First gather up the weeds and bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So the mustard seed, he presented another parable to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a person took and sowed in his field. And this is smaller than all the other seeds, but when fully grown, it's larger than the garden plants and becomes a tree, so the birds of the sky come and nest in its branches. And he spoke of another parable to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 sot of flour until all was leavened. All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak anything to them without a parable. This was so that what was spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. I will open my mouth in parables. I will proclaim things hidden since the foundation of the world. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. His disciples came and said to him, Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. And he said, The one who sows good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the weeds are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers and the angels. So just as the weeds are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous shall shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father, and the one who has ears, let him hear. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid again. And from joy over it, he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking 5 pearls, and upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold everything he had and bought it. I don't think I need to read anything else about. No, I'll just go ahead and finish out reading the whole chapter since it's almost done. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. And when it was filled, they pulled it up on the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good fish into containers, but the bad they threw away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth and remove the wicked from the righteous, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? They said to him, Yes. And Jesus said to them, Therefore, every scribe who has become a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who brings out his treasure, new things and old. Jesus revisits Nazareth. When Jesus had finished these parables, he departed from there. And then he came to his hometown and began teaching them in the synagogue, with the result that they were astonished and said, Where did this man acquire the wisdom and these miraculous powers? Is it not the carpenter's son? And his mother is his mother not called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? And where then did this man acquire all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to him, A prophet is not dishonored except his hometown and in his house and in his own household. And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. So But I'm trying to find all these notes just to make sure I covered things. I'm sorry, my notes are kind of sloppy, so I'm reading through some things and not really paying attention to the chat if there's anyone there for right now, because I'm just trying to make sure I read through and get this point across. Because people always ask me, when I go into these various chats, they're like, Chris, what's your thoughts on all this? And then it's like, if I get cut off and I'm not allowed to talk, they start jumping to conclusions. So I just want to make a video and say, hey, this is what I think about once saved, always saved. You got to convince me that you can apostatize. If you want me to believe in this, you have to convince me that you can apostatize and still be saved. All right, like you can just go worship Satan, go murder and everything, and just yep, you sincerely believed, but but now you're doing all these things. Now if you want to say, hey, you believe that if you really got the Spirit, you won't do these things. To me, that's just that's abiding. And I believe you will be saved. And I believe that you can have a relationship where you can't even imagine doing this to God, where you're like, man, I can't imagine breaking a commandment, or something like that. I can't imagine going and worshiping Satan. I can't even imagine it. You might think that someone who's truly saved just cannot do that. But see, that's kind of what the parable of the sower and seed says, right? Like, these people are abiding and they're going out and they're producing fruit, but they have a relationship. And people will say, well, no, now you're saying abiding, Chris, is performance. And if you don't perform, you don't get saved. But it says, even in this parable, that they're producing fruit, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not misreading this. All right. It says the fourth people, see, and look at this. Hold on. This is something I just noticed too. So when we're reading about this third group, because it says, in verse 19's the first group, verse 20 is the second group. And verse 21 is the second group. So 20 and 21 is the second group. 19 is the first group. And then 22 is the third group. Because it says, the one sown with seed among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, and the anxiety of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. So becomes unfruitful. So they actually were bearing fruit, right? That's what it looks like to me. And becomes unfruitful. Now, maybe this English is wrong. I'll go look that up and just make sure that's what that word actually says there, Matthew, Matthew 13, 22, interlinear. So I just kind of noticed that word, but I just want to make sure that's what that actually is. Yeah, it looks like it's become barren, become unfruitful, right? Because it says becomes unfruitful. So the only other thing I can do is maybe chat GPT, just to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. I just noticed that Matthew 13:22 says becomes unfruitful. Does the Greek meaning mean that they had actually bared fruit before, but now stopped. So I'm just kind of curious because that would mean you actually did bear fruit. All right. So does become unfruitful in Matthew 13:22 mean they previously bore fruit? Yes, the Greek explicitly indicates a change of state from fruitfulness to becoming unfruitful. So the Greek text, Matthew 13:22, and the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word and it becomes unfruitful. So it's like a plant that was bearing fruit and now it's become unfruitful because it got choked, right? So it gives us the Greek. I don't know how to read the Greek right here. So anyway, it says means to come to be, to change state, right? So that's what this root word right here, it means to become, to come to be, to change state. So it became unfruitful, right? So it never means simply is unfruitful, right? So that's the big difference there. It's not saying is unfruitful. So it says it becomes unfruitful. So it was bearing fruit. So it is possible for someone to actually even bear fruit and you stop, right? So some people who want to claim that that third group is just people who didn't really believe. No, they're bearing fruit and they're believing. So see, this is why I go back to just arguing with free grace or having discussions with free grace people because they're admitting that I don't have to sit here and have an argument about what that Greek text means. They're saying, "Yep, you're right, Chris. That does mean that." So at least I have this agreement. So it's like, so now we can actually have a real discussion. Because if people want to say that, oh no, this text is not saying that, well, all of you other OSAS people, once they'd always say people, I just I discard you because it's like I need to have a discussion about reality. And the reality is that's what this text is saying. So I'm not gonna get into this whole thing that, oh no, they didn't really believe, and then that's how you um perceive all these other passages, warning passages, passages that look like people clearly walked away. And that's why I go straight to here first, because before I even start to even discuss this subject, and I recommend this for anyone who wants to discuss the once saved always saved subject, and you're like, well, should I believe in um once saved always saved or not? You go right here first, and then now you're like, oh, now I got to just figure out, can someone apostatize and still be saved? That's all you got to figure out. If you believe that, you believe in once saved always saved, free grace. Congratulations, you're free grace now. If you don't believe someone can fully apostatize and be saved, then you're not once saved always saved, and you're not free grace. You're more like, you're more in my camp. In my camp, it just says, I'm not saying, now I'm still studying all this myself, but to me, I read certain passages in Romans, and it doesn't look like you can lose your salvation just by sinning, because it says, I can't remember that verse off the top of my head, but it's like, if you do sin, we have a mediator. Gosh, man, my mind's just kind of blanking on that part in Romans. Um, but basically, it doesn't say that you sin one time, you lose your salvation, right? The way I look at it is, it's an abiding relationship. When you have a relationship with your kids or something, just because something goes wrong in your house, you don't necessarily kick them out of your house. But but you do expect them to correct the behavior, right? Or at least, and even care, have some respect. There's a relationship here. So the abiding is a relationship. You walk away from this relationship. You walk away from working on this relationship, right? You walk away from doing anything to strengthen the relationship. That relationship becomes weak. Just like a father that never bonds with their kids, right? Like it's not like, let's say a father tries to put in the effort to bond with his kids, but his kids aren't there. Well, or his kids just keep ignoring all of it. Maybe the kids get caught up in their own little selfish desires. Dad's working, but now dad's got some time. Well, kids are all caught up in their own thing. Well, that you can't build a real bond there. It's like, or the dad that's never around, dad leaves. People see these stories in real life where the children don't have a good a bond with their dad, right? And so they don't even care if their dad dies because they don't have a bond. And sometimes that's the dad's fault. um but in this analogy, we know God's perfect and God's love, so we know it's not God's fault. But even in real life, I'm just basically saying, if you don't do things to work on that relationship to strengthen that bond easily breaks. So, and then it starts to make things like edifying people, encouraging people, in the faith, being an actual true teacher, worrying about truth, worrying about that you're getting the text correctly when you teach it to others. These things start to matter because it's like, if you if these things if you start saying once saved always saved, then these things start to not matter as much. And I think we're seeing a spillover into the rest of Christianity because I see a lot of crazy things being taught in Christianity. If I see things like people teaching there's two new covenants, which when free grace, like people like I think his name's Louis Perry Schaefer, Chafer. When he was developing the like I don't like I guess like his dispensational free grace doctrines, he was teaching that there's two new covenants. So a lot of this stuff comes from people teaching really wacky things because they're trying to hold on to a view and make it fit, right? Um, and to me, free grace looks like it's like a result of like a rejection of Calvinism, but they're still wanting to keep some Calvinistic principles. Um, and because it's like it bothers people to think that God determined someone to go to hell. God determined someone to go to heaven, because then it's like, well, where's your real salvation at, right? Because if God determined it, I don't even think God's a savior in Calvinism, right? Because if you think about it, if your salvation's based on God just determining things, and you're determined from the foundation of the world, you're determined before God even creates anything, basically. um, then you were always going to heaven. There's nothing to save you from in Calvinism. The only thing you realize is maybe that you thought you were heading to hell. Oh, hey, I was heading to heaven. So you can say, well, positionally, you were always saved from the foundation of the world, but experientially, you experience salvation when you think, oh, there's a God, I'm going to hell, but oh, God saved me, God picked me, and now I get to go to heaven. And so that's your experiential salvation, right? So you were always positionally saved from the foundation of the world, according to the Calvinistic system, but now you're experiencing salvation because now you know about it. And then it's like I see free grace kind of having the same thought process, but they change it up a little bit, and they're like, well, that one moment in time you're positionally saved, and then I and I'm still trying to understand what they mean by experientially. Like there's an experiential salvation and positional salvation in their system, and the only way I understand that is if, to me, it makes the Calvinist system makes sense. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying from their perspective to have a positional salvation, and then but then it's not really even a positional salvation in Calvinism, isn't it? Because you were always saved. So when were you heading to hell if you were always saved? You're just experiencing, and then they'll be like, well, God's outside of time, but according to the timeline. But looking from God's perspective, that's what, see, because God is truth. So we need to look at things from God's perspective. So if God is truth, right? What was it from his perspective? Oh, from God's perspective, you were always saved. When did he ever damn you to hell? The Calvinists can't, there was never a point, right? Because that would mean God changed his mind. God was like, God would, in fact, in order for salvation to exist in Calvinism, God would have to first damn everyone to hell and then be like, you know what? I just, I don't think that was a very good determination I made. I think I'm going to change. I think I'm going to change my mind, and that I'm going to make a better determination, and I'm going to save a few people from my original determination. Then you would have salvation in Calvinism because God determines everything according to Calvinism. So since God's determining everything, he determines everyone to go to hell. Then he's like, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I think I'm going to save a few people from my original determination. Then the Calvinist would say, oh, thank you, dear Lord God, for saving me from your original determination. Then you would have salvation from God's perspective, not from your man's perspective, man walking around in a timeline, because that's already decided. You got to remember, God is truth, so God's got to be a savior from his perspective, because God is truth. So God would have to be a savior from God's perspective, not your perspective, right? So from God's perspective, he knows if he determined you to be saved, and if he always determined you to be saved, I mean, if you were always determined to go to heaven, when did he save you? Those things just don't make sense in my mind when I talk to a Calvinist, because I'm just like, hey, just draw it on a chart and explain it to me. See, in my system, I don't have God making some eternal decree. So in my system, it's real easy. I draw my timeline because it's like God created everything perfect. Then man sinned. And then so man made the mistake. And then God, has Jesus save people from the mistake man made by choosing to believe the devil and eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Right? So, and then God saves them, and then those people make a decision. Right? So God sends the Savior, and then those people have the choice to believe in the Savior. But then Calvinists will say, oh, God had to, put that in them. But, we don't really understand how people work, but we do understand we got a choice, because the Bible constantly says you have a choice. So anyway, free grace, I think what they did was they were like, well, we don't like that determinism stuff. So now they try to make it to where everyone has a choice. And then I guess somehow they escape warning passages by claiming positional salvation versus experiential salvation. And I'm still I'm still trying to make sense of what that means, because if someone hits the lottery, right? They're positionally rich if they're making $1 million a day for the rest of their life. So I would say they're positionally rich, and guess what? They're experientially rich. Because if they got access to that money at any time, they're experientially and positionally rich. Now you could be like, well, Chris, what if they lose their credit card? Then they would be positionally rich, but experientially broke, right? And maybe something like that's going to go happen in your salvation. And it's like, well, no, because that person who hit the lottery, if they lost their connection to their funds, well, now they're positionally broke and experientially broke until they can get that card back, right? Or get a hold of their funds. So now their position changed. That's why they no longer have access to their funds. That's why they're broke. I mean, to me, like when people start making this whole experiential and positionally, it's like, dude, like this doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm positionally sleepy, but experientially I'm wide awake. I don't get this stuff. No, it's like if someone is not going to I'm not going to deal with people that like that, man, myself. It's like, you're one or the other. It's like if you're positionally something, that's why you're experiencing something. See, if I get saved, I'm positionally saved. And now, guess what I'm doing? I'm experiencing salvation because I'm positionally saved. Like, there's no way you cannot experience salvation. That's why I don't understand when people start having these like these like split words and things like that. So anyway, I'll keep reading this. So let's talk about the Greek. So anyway, that unfruitful, um, it always means to be. That word means, well, it says becomes unfruitful. So the opposite of being static, it implies transformation, development, a shift, a change of conditions. So when Jesus says the person becomes unfruitful, it means they were once fruitful and then transitioned into unfruitfulness. If Jesus meant is unfruitful from the start, he would have used these two Greek words, is unfruitful, being unfruitful, but he did not. He used this Greek term, the strongest Greek verb for becoming something after not being it. For becoming something after not being it. That's kind of some weird wording. The imagery itself requires prior fruitfulness. In agriculture, you cannot become unfruitful unless you were producing fruit earlier. A seed that never sprouted is not described this way. A plant that never bore fruit cannot become fruitless. It is already fruitless. So even the metaphor Jesus uses, this person grew, bore fruit, then was choked, and lost fruitfulness. This destroys once saved, always saved, free grace. They never were saved, fall back. And like I said, this is just something I'm reading that the AI, because I was just asking it about that one word. So comparison with Luke 8:14 even clearer. Luke 8:14, they go forth and are choked and bring no fruit to maturity. So it gives us a Greek word, and it says meaning they do not bring their fruit to completion, maturity. They have fruit, they just never reaches maturity because it stops. So Luke proves the plant truly grows, the fruit appears, but the person fails to complete or bring the fruit to its end. This is the opposite of never saved. I guess that's another thing I haven't thought about. So if this means, I'm not sure if this would be some way they could escape this argument. They do not bring their fruit to completion, maturity. If they argue the text is saying that, if that gives them an out. But theologically, Jesus himself defines fruit as abiding obedience. John 15:2. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Two key points. They are in me, that destroys that they were never saved. Um, oh, well, I never thought about that one. So John 15:2. Every branch that is in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. So these branches were in him, but they're not bearing fruit, so he takes them away. So the two key points, they're in me, that destroys that they never were saved. They do not bear fruit. That is the same ideal as becoming unfruitful. Um, and John 15:6, he warns, if anyone does not abide in me, he is cast forth and burned. Same logic as in Matthew 13:22. So, synthesis of what Matthew 13:22 actually teaches. According to the Greek and agricultural metaphor, a genuine spiritual being, real fruit bearing, word grows in them, life of God is present, but later choked. They become unfruitful, a change from fruitfulness to loss. This state is what is caused by their choices, care, riches. They fall away because the fruit stopped developing. This is fully consistent with conditional perseverance. It destroys the notion of true believer. True believer will always bear fruit. You could not design a clearer refutation of OSAS free grace than Jesus's parable itself. So that's just what AI gave me when I just asked it just about these words right here in Matthew 13, verse 22. Um, so I'm going to try to see if I answer any questions. Um, so, hey, Melody. Uh, yeah, Melody, I would say no. Well, th- okay, so you asked her, and now, granted, you might have commented, yeah, about like what, 20 minutes ago on this. So, maybe I covered this point already. Um, like I said, I'm open minded, but there's been a couple of people who asked me, Chris, why do you believe what you believe? Um, and they have a negative outlook on me because I don't accept once saved, always saved. So that's partly why I wanted to touch on this. And then I just heard a lot of things, and then I always hear different once saved, always camps arguing with each other. Then I hear conditionalists argue with the once saved, always saved people, and I hear very inconsistent arguments, and or it sounds like people don't understand where people are coming from, or why are they even teaching these things. And so the point of my video is, it's not to be like, oh, this is a once and for all argument, I gotta it's airtight against once saved, always saved. I'm just trying to explain to people who are arguing, because I listen to hundreds of hours of this while I'm at work, right? And it sounds like to me that people do not understand why someone like Charles, who's free grace, will say, oh, you can worship Satan and still be saved as long as you had one moment of sincere belief. Well, part of that is, if you, in my opinion, if you read this Greek consistently, which I think he's reading it consistently, you have to adopt that view if you really want to believe in once saved, always saved, right? And I just don't see how you can, if you believe once saved, always saved. So I'm not even debating whether Charles is right or wrong right now. I'm just saying, to me, that's the only consistent once saved, always saved position, because these verses clearly, like the Greek seems to make it clear that they actually believed. So Melody says, no root would suggest not saved. And I would say, yeah. And so no root would be not saved. And even though they believed, they didn't have a root. And so that's why, it died, right? It withered away. Okay, I'm trying to look at, because I think one version. Yeah, the others fell in rocky places where they did not have much soil. So this is the second group. They sprang up immediately, but because they had no depth of soil, so that means the root didn't like take into the soil. So it's just like a plant land. It's because you can see seeds like this where there's like some water, maybe a tiny drop of soil, but and you'll see the seeds start to sprout. In fact, before you plant seeds, you can put them in water, right? And you'll see the seeds sprout. So a seed can sprout without soil, and they'll spring up. And then sometimes what people do is, once they spring up, they'll go plant them in soil, right? So it's possible that they can spring up on rocky places that did not have much soil. So there's a little bit. There just wasn't much, and they sprang up immediately, but they had no depth of soil. And so after the sun rose, they were scorched because they had no root, and they withered away. So yeah, that's why I would say I'd agree with Melody when she says no root means no saved. Or she's asking maybe, and it's like, yeah, I would say not saved, and I would also say the other ones fell among thorns, came up, choked them out. Those people are not saved either. They believe, they just didn't. They're just not saved. So it becomes unfruitful. She says becomes unfruitful suggests to her that it bears no fruit at all. see, that's not really what I got from the AI. So here, I'll ask it one more time. Let's get rid of that. So, does unfruitful just mean it did not reach maturity in Matthew 13:22? Okay, so it says short answer no. Unfruitful in Matthew 13:22 is broader than not reaching maturity, but that is included within it. To be precise, Luke 8:14 focuses specifically on not bringing fruit to maturity. Matthew 13:22 uses a more general word, fruitless, with the verb becomes. So that would indicate a state of fruitfulness because it's now becoming fruitless. So it did have fruit, it's just becoming fruitless, is what it looks like the Greek is saying, meaning a transition into a state where fruit stops or fails. So the full answer is in Matthew 13:22, becomes unfruitful means the person moves into a state where fruit fails, whether it's because it stops growing, never reaches maturity, or withers. This includes the idea of not reaching maturity, but it's not limited to it. So, read the rest, but I kind of want to make sure I cover everything. So, Melody says, I planted a fruit tree some years ago and it didn't bear fruit at all. So, she says, vivate, verb for becoming something after not being it. Was meant to produce fruit, but didn't, comes to mind for me. So it was meant to. So okay, so she's saying maybe it was meant to bear fruit, but it didn't come to mind. But it didn't. Like my fruit tree, it was meant to bear fruit, but its purpose was to bear fruit, but it didn't. Just throwing, and she says she's just throwing thoughts out there. Yeah, because Melody's trying to, just. She's like me. I think she's like me. She listens to a lot of different people, and she's just kind of open-minded and trying to make sure she is understanding things correctly. And that's what I'm trying to do. I like, to me, I got 2 children, right? I'm not sitting here trying to teach, the wrong things to them. In fact, that's why I even spend this extra time, because I'm trying to figure out how to teach my children properly, because I don't feel like I was taught properly growing up. Well, maybe I was. I just don't know it, right? Um, but I've been around church since I was 8 years old. Right now, I'm 51 years old. All right. Um, and I just recently started studying the Bible really deeply the past 3 years. I've been studying it fairly deeply for maybe 15, 20. But like, it's only been the past 3 years where I got a job to where I can listen to things continuously. And then I also always thought, the church has it figured out. There's nothing left for me to really figure out. And when I used to hear people like, there's some of these dispensationals I strongly disagree with, but I used to go to a church and hear these guys, in the front of the pews and talking, maybe even preaching, and they'd be saying all these things, jumping on all these verses, having the Bible just photographically memorized. And I'm like, my gosh, man, like, it sounds like they know what they're talking about. So I never bothered to challenge them, because I'm like, man, I don't have the Bible memorized. Some things don't make sense to me, and I think part of my reason was the part of the reason why they didn't make sense to me is because these people, even though they're full of knowledge and full of studying, they never come to understanding. And so I'm starting to realize that these past 3 years. So now, but I still would be scared to actually challenge people, but we also have AI. So now if I go, oh, wait a minute, does the Greek actually say that? Like, it's not, but see, I'm not that expert of Greek, so what I can do is I can ask the AI, what about this Greek word? Does this mean that? Okay, if this really means that, are there other passages where it has the exact same meaning? And the AI can find this for me in seconds. Now, being a person that works 70 hours a week, that's almost impossible prior to AI. But now I have AI. Now it's like, so now that's why people start to see me start to challenge some of these beliefs out there. It's like, it's not that like I'm some, new Christian with some wacky things. I don't think people ever stop to look at this stuff. And now we got the tools to do it fast. But what normal person could do this besides people who are full-time seminary professors? And then you start to realize that these full-time seminary professors have ulterior motives and things like that. And some of them, pastors, they don't want to, their only income, the only thing they know how to do is pastor a church. So sometimes they kind of keep things kind of watered down and simple because they're like, well, if I start to teach too much stuff, I'm going to start to offend people. That's why you start seeing these pastors that seem like you come to church every week and it's the same narrow message. It's almost like that's the only important thing to even teach at a church. So these people, what they don't want to do is they don't want to offend people. They don't want to get into debates and arguments because that jeopardizes their income because they don't know what else to do. And I started noticing that, especially when I started debating Seventh Day Adventists and other cult members, because it's like, oh, these people, they have a pension tied up in all this. They don't know what else to do. They're in their 50s, 40s. They don't want to change vocations. They also got all these family friends, and this starts to become a pressure. Same thing for the Roman Church. Same thing for the Orthodox Church. These people are not going to easily just up and leave all that. And then on top of it, especially when the alternative is they're hearing craziness. So if they hear crazy stuff like all this dispensational talk about multiple new covenants, 11 gospels or 144,000 gospels, whatever they teach. They teach like some wild things, 7 gospels, all this other stuff. It's like, if you're an Orthodox or a Roman or someone in the Roman Church and you hear this stuff and it doesn't make sense to you and it sounds pretty wild, it's like, why not stay in your own church? And so the part of the reason why I'm doing this too is that people know I've had this channel called the Protestant View for a while. And when I first started it, it was about mainly politics because I thought I had nothing to add theologically. So I was like, but the one thing I could maybe contribute is talking about how I noticed that we are inundated with all and kind of like brainwashed with all this Catholic television. Because when you start to look at everyone who runs the TV, well, Fox News is entirely Catholic run or from Roman Church run. I'm sorry, forgive me for using the word Catholic. Try not to use the word Catholic because I believe when you say Catholic, in their minds they go, oh yes, you're right, we are Catholic, we are the one true faith, we are the one true church. So I would really encourage people not to call them Catholic. Call yourself Catholic. I mean, but don't call them Catholic, because it just encourages this delusion where it's like, yes, we are the one true church, you're right. And yeah, so even if you attack them, they're like, but they're still calling us the one true church. They're calling us Catholic. They're not Catholic, we're Catholic. So yeah, all these Protestants are crazy. Um, and then that's another thing too. I was thinking about was the word Protestant. Some people don't even like using the word Protestant. And when I use the word Protestant, just to let you know, and I post this on YouTube community posts, and I really haven't had time to post this everywhere else, and please forgive me. But on YouTube, I make these community posts because I don't have time to do videos, and I can go a little bit more into depth with certain thoughts. And one of the things that's bothering me is people rejecting the word Protestant now. And some of these people, I'm like, good. I'm glad you're not calling yourself Protestant because you're not. You're hooked up into the Roman Church, and you're even teaching teachings that actually derive their foundation from the Roman Church. So good for you for just calling yourself evangelical. Great. That's exactly perfectly what you probably are, because you are not Protestant. And I would say that yes, while there were some Protestants who left the Roman Church, there were also Protestants prior to that. There were also Protestants that were never part of the Roman Church, and when I talk to these Roman Church apologists, they like to take and paint every Protestant into this corner where it's like, no, you're only a Calvinist. A Protestant is only a Calvinist that rebelled against the Roman Church and left the Roman Church. And they kind of paint it as if there was no other Christians besides people in the Roman Church. And it's like, but there were groups. There were many groups. There were even groups with beliefs like mine who kept Sabbath, observed Passover. There were plenty of groups like that. They were tiny, small groups, but they kind of had to hide because the Roman Church would chase them in the mountains and try to kill them and things like that. I mean, there's some very gruesome things that the Roman Church would go and chase down people. Think about this: chase down people, horribly kill them. And all because of what? Because they believe the Bible, and they believe the Bible should be interpreted a certain way. And in my opinion, they were actually interpreting it like Polycarp, and a lot of the Quartodecimans were interpreting it. But yet in Rome, and the ironic thing about it is Rome and the Orthodox Church, or so-called Orthodox Church, are not really Orthodox, they're unorthodox, Eastern Unorthodox. But anyway, these people will venerate Polycarp, but then they will say that people that believe the exact same thing that Polycarp believes are heretics. So it's like you venerate this guy, but yet if someone came to your church and said, "Hey, let's observe Passover on the 14th of Nisan," they would reject the guy. Like Polycarp couldn't walk in their church, even though Polycarp learned directly from the disciples and was a bishop, and he's someone you even venerate. If that guy walked into your Roman church or Eastern Unorthodox church today, you'd be like, "Hey, you Judaizer, get out of here." You'd kick him out of your church. You'd call him a heretic. And say he's not part of the church. And then you would say, "Oh, he's not even saved because he's not part of our church. You got to be part of our church to be saved. You're outside the body of Christ because you're outside the church, Polycarp." So now Polycarp's not even saved. But see, they're always, "No, we venerate him." Well, you venerate him, but you would kick anyone who has his beliefs out of your church. Because remember, the Roman church tried to excommunicate Polycarp's church around 190 AD. So these were people who actually had contact with Polycarp, and they were doing the exact same things as Polycarp, and yet they get excommunicated from his church. I mean, the Rome is trying to excommunicate them from the so-called church, right? It's kind of crazy to me. And whenever I go on these panels and these shows, and I finally get a chance to talk to someone from the Roman Church or Eastern Unorthodox, they really struggle. It's like you threw a monkey wrench in there, all these gears, and their brains just like, just like, whoa, like they didn't like comprehend, like didn't think about all that. They just kind of assume that it's always been this way and that everyone's done it this way. And it's like, no, these people were not going along with the Roman Church, and you're sitting there venerating them, and they're teaching the opposite of what you're teaching. So, anyway, gosh, because I probably never ever get a chance to do this. So maybe, I'm so low on time. But I got something else I wrote if I can find it. Oh, let's see if I can even find it though. Because there was something I wrote about the Seventh Day Baptist. Richard's good. This is nothing negative about him. It's just something. Okay, so it's not under that file. Sorry, it's taking me a second. So now I gotta figure out where I even put this at. Um, oh boy, I might not even be able to find it. Oh man, this is pretty. I thought it was interesting, but um, I don't know if I'll find it now. Oh, I think I found it. So, yeah, well, maybe I found it. I gotta figure out. Okay, so here's something. Um, I was thinking about an analogy to help someone understand replacement theology, like what the Roman Church teaches, where it basically teaches the church replaces Israel and the Jews, and then dispensationalism, which it teaches that there's the church and then there's Israel, right? And so they got this artificial two entity type thing. And then you have Hebraic covenant theology. And I kind of toss Reform covenant theology to the side because I feel like there's some mixtures between the dispensational view and the Roman church view when I think of some aspects of the Reformed so called covenant theology view. I think it's got some holes in it. So, so I'll just kind of toss that one out since it's so much of a mix, and it's not really a pure form. And then so then the third group would be the Hebraic covenant theology, which believes that there's always just one body of believers throughout history, all grafted, all part of the same tree, not two separate groups. And so I thought like a really good analogy would be like slavery in America. And this will tie into the Seventh day Baptist Church. So, in this analogy, you got these three groups in early America. So, group one is like the slavery forever crowd. So, that would be like your replacement theology. You know, they wanted a racial caste system, wanted permanent hierarchy, opposed unity, right? Opposed equal citizenship. So this kind of like matches the Roman Church, you know, a religious caste system, priests, laity, salvation mediated by a hierarchy, you know, Rome at the top. And but here's the key part: Rome at the top and Jews permanently beneath, right? Because they make Jews seem like, you know, disgusting. You if you do anything that looks Jewish or basically apostolic, right? Like Polycarp. Well, you're a Judaizer. So if you're like Polycarp or something, you're a Judaizer, basically. And so it's like they got this real low view of Jews, and their church just replaced everything. So I would say that's the first group, like the slavery forever crowd. And with the Jews being like the black people, basically. So group two, the separate but equal crowd. So this would be your dispensationalists. So they oppose slavery, but they did not want integration. So they wanted blacks to have their own land and claim this was honoring them. It was a polite way to avoid equality. You know, a kinder looking form of segregation. See, the South wanted segregation, the pro slavery people wanted segregation. And then you have like these one people that was like, yeah, let's be separate but equal. But they weren't really equal. They were like, you know, blacks are still, you know, we need to keep separated. We don't need to be mixing together. So I would say that's kind of like your dispensationalist. You know, It's like a kinder form of segregation. So, Jews are special. So it's like, so it's kind of like blacks, you're special, right? Jews, you're special, but you must stay separate. They cannot join the body of Christ, right? Because it's dispensational. So like we're separate. You cannot join the body of Christ. Basically, that's what it kind of comes across. There's the Israel, and then there's the church. They cannot share the one covenant. They must have a different kingdom, a different land, different promises, different gospel, different salvation. So this sounds positive, but it's actually like a segregation theology. It's a theological version of saying to black people, "Oh no, we totally value you, but please go live somewhere else in your own separate territory." Wink, wink, right? So that's kind of how I see dispensationalism in this analogy. And then you got group three, the abolitionist integrationist, which is what the Seventh-day Baptist Church first done. So it's kind of odd that these people that were the most Torah observant, that believe like, oh no, God's commandments are not just for Jews, they're for everyone, right? So think about this. This church, this is why I even became a Sabbath keeper, is because when I was like studying these people fighting against Abraham Lincoln, I started studying all this like abolition, early abolition works, right? And I started studying like, okay, one thing I want to also prove is that Christianity is the ones primarily responsible, and not just Christianity, but Protestants are primarily it. But then you would see some Protestants that were for slavery. Then you would see some that were against slavery, and then the different ways they were against slavery. And then you had the one group, the Seventh-day Baptists, and they were completely about abolishing slavery. They were the most uh, um what do you call it, the most passionate group out of them all, right? And what's interesting is they also have a more Hebraic, I won't say that's perfectly Hebraic, but they have a more Hebraic covenant theology than all the other religions, right? And they're saying that all of laws and commandments are for everyone. Everyone's created in the image of God. Everyone comes from Adam and Eve, and everyone's created in his image. So everyone would be having the same rules. So in group three, you have the abolitionists, integrationists, rejected caste, rejected segregation, said we are one nation under one law, equality under one constitution, one citizenship, all people brought into the same system with equal rights. So this is basically your Hebraic covenant theology, right? So Hebraic covenant theology, one people of God, one covenant. Isaiah 42, Isaiah 49, Jeremiah 31, Hebrews 8, one body, one olive tree, one shepherd, one flock, one salvation, Jew and Gentile integrated under one relationship with God, no second-class believers, no parallel systems, no replacement, no segregation. So basically, this is Paul's entire point in Ephesians chapter 2, right? He made the two one. So the two are one, breaking down the wall of partition to create in himself one new man. So that's Ephesians 2:14 through 15. See, integration theology. All right. Well, that's why I use that analogy. Because when I hear people, dispensationalists, talk, and I think about the Jews, it started occurring to me. It's like, what if the Jews were black people, right? What if they were black people? I'm not saying that they are. Like, I don't believe in that Hebrew Israelite thing, but I'm like saying, like, let's make this analogy where you're talking about them the same way black people. And then I started noticing, man, this sounds a lot like the South, and abolition and slavery and abolition, all this starts to sound like the same kinds of conversations. So um so basically, when you start to see dispensationalism for what it is, and even replacement theology, you start seeing that they teach two people, two destinies, two ways of salvation, two kingdoms, two laws, one for Israel, one for the church, two inheritances, two agendas, two eternities, basically. And this is not biblical. It's not even the gospel, right? So in closing, I think what I want to do is, I wanted to talk about the Seventh-day Baptists. So the Seventh-day Baptists, so I found this information earlier. So I'm going to put this up on the screen. So had AI do this. So Seventh-day Baptists were among the first American Christians to openly. So this is what the AI told me because I was asking it about it. So Seventh-day Baptists were the first American Christians to openly condemn slavery. Historical facts. As early as the 1650s and 1660s, Seventh-day Baptists in Rhode Island were writing formal anti-slavery statements. Their 1675 writings explicitly call slavery a moral evil and incompatible with the gospel. Unlike many Puritans, Anglicans, and later denominations, they did not hide behind biblical slavery arguments. They put them ahead of so this puts them ahead of the Quakers in some cases, and centuries ahead of Southern Baptists, Methodists, or Presbyterians. Their theology naturally leans towards integration. Seventh-day Baptists were shaped by covenant theology rooted in Torah, Sabbath kept as a creation or ordinance, egalitarian congregationalism, rejecting hierarchy, biblical literalism without Roman influence, liberty of conscience, Roger Williams influence. This combination makes segregation impossible for them. Why? Because if you believe one Sabbath, one covenant community, one law for the native born and stranger, which is in Exodus 12:49, one standard of holiness, one people under Christ, you cannot support racial separation. Their theology is the closest. So AI says it's closest to my Hebraic covenant theology, not dispensationalism. It's integrationist by nature. They rejected every system that required caste or hierarchy. They opposed the Anglican hierarchy, Roman sacerdotalism, social caste systems, racial superiority theories. They believed each believer stood equal before God, a completely Hebraic ideal. This made them distinctly abolitionists and instinctively integrationists. Where the dispensationalists created two peoples, two plans theology. Seventh-day Baptists believe in one flock, one shepherd, one law for all. They were practically integrationists, not just theoretically. Evidence from colonial records show. So I think this is one of the most interesting things I wanted to get to. So evidence for colonial records show the Seventh-day Baptists welcomed free Black believers into their congregations. Some fellowshipped as full members, extremely rare for that time. I mean, full members. It's like in most churches, if they would even allow a Black person in, normally they would say, let's just build a Black church and put all of them in their own little Black church, right? But and it was real rare that you would even let them come into your white church. And on top of that, even if you did let them come into your white church, you would have separate pews for them, separate area for them, right? So here's the Seventh-day Baptists all the way back in the 1600s, and they're letting these people have full members. They oppose segregated pews and segregated sacraments. They supported manumission laws in their region. So that's basically manumission is basically where the slave owner would voluntarily release the slaves. But like I think when it says manumission laws, it's still it means like the states can voluntarily make you release the slaves. So it's I think it's from the states creating their own anti-slavery laws, or various areas creating their own anti-slavery laws. And so the AI says the black people, the Seventh-day Baptists did not say black people should have their own territory. They said, you are brothers and sisters, let them worship with us. So this is a huge difference from the separate but equal attitude. So, anyway, and that's just kind of my little analogy that it fucking put up in a chart form. So anyway, didn't really get to everything. Well, I guess I could ask it that. No, I don't think no prominent. No. You know what? In fact, I know they didn't own slaves. There's zero. No prominent Seventh-day Baptists own slaves. Not from everything I've looked up. If you can find it, let me know. But oh, thanks, Melody. I appreciate it. Yeah, so this is just some stuff I randomly found as I'm doing research. I'm still trying to work on everything that I post about, my community post. It's just I'm working several hours, and plus, to be honest, I was a little burned out, man, preparing for that last debate. And it's not just that last debate. It's the past 4 years, because ever since COVID happened, and I was like working a lot of hours, and I was trying to organize things against it, organize things against the lockdown. And I kind of felt like I was the only one by myself, because, I wanted to protest against Trump locking down. Right. And a lot of people, for whatever in their weird minds, they're like, Trump's against it, but Trump's the one locking us all down. Right. So, and then it's like people like straw man my political views, because it's like, well, what are you, a Democrat? It's like, no, I'm a registered Republican. I even ran for office. And even in 2024, I was on the ballot for a House of Representative seats, for U.S. House of Representative seats, for the Republican Party. But I was like getting so much opposition that I was like, you know what? I'm about ready to lose my mind pushing myself so hard, because I'm working a full-time job, 50 hours a week. I got, 2 small children. I have to raise. I have, if my car breaks down, I feel like having a nervous breakdown, because that 1 or 2 hours to go take it to get it fixed, like, I don't have that kind of time in my life, especially if I'm trying to set things up and meet with people and things like that. Like, I cannot, like, I have to have a life that goes perfect and cannot have a single hiccup in it when I'm pushing myself that hard. So then when I have people attacking me on top of it and fighting me, I don't like it's just like I start to lose my mind, because I'm pushing myself real hard because I care, and then I'm getting treated like I'm a piece of crap, right? And not only that, it's making my family suffer, because it's taking time away from my family. So I drop out of the race, right? And it's like, but it's like, it's so basically it's 4 years of dealing with things like that. Because like I said, I was going to try to run in 2024. And I was on the ticket, but I just like I was starting to feel the effects of pushing myself real hard, organizing protests, doing all these things with my extra time, getting a lot of hatred, because it's like people won't just listen to the arguments. They want to hate you first. And it's like, well, this guy keeps renewing the emergency order every 90 days. Maybe we should protest against him and tell him not to keep locking down, because he has to renew this. See, if Trump just doesn't even show up for work, all of that COVID stuff goes away. There's no forced vaccination. I don't have to witness my family members getting injured by the vaccination because they felt pressured to take it in order to keep their jobs. I don't have to witness like a loved one dying, right? I don't have to witness these things. See, all these things came from hard-hearted people, hard-skulled people that wouldn't listen. It's like, so, and I dealt with your guy, all these people's hatred, all the negative effects of their hatred, all their negative effects of their hard-headedness, thinking they know better than everyone, when all they do is flip on Fox News, which is ran by the Roman Church. Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Laura Ingraham, Ann Coulter, Rudy Giuliani, all these guests on their show. All of them come from the Roman Church. Why can't we hear a Protestant voice? And then you guys go and attack the one Protestant that's speaking out and going, these guys are hiding something. And I make good logical connections to why they would be hiding something and why they are crafting propaganda. And all you people can think is, no, I flip on Fox News. This is reality. The Roman Church told me what reality is. And Chris, I'm not going to listen to you. And I'm going to just hate you because they told me my Roman Church run TV told me a Republican is this. They told me Trump is a Republican. You're speaking out against him. So therefore, I'm so brainwashed, Chris, that I'm not going to listen to you. And because the Roman Church told me how to think. And even though they're a Protestant, they call themselves a Protestant or they call themselves an evangelical, right? So it's like, and it's just like, I don't know. Like, I guess during that debate with Charles, when I was studying for it, I was finding things and I thought they were interesting. I'd be bringing them people. And I'm bringing them to certain people who went to seminary schools, certain people who run seminary schools, asking them questions. I got sometimes very depressing answers. Because I'm like, how do people go to seminary for so long? And some of this stuff seems basic. And you've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. And then it's like, and on top of that, you get hatred attacks. People will not let me even get 4 sentences out, to ask them a question, to set up like, look, here's this. How are you squaring this away? I can't even get that out, right? It's just, and there was just a lot of that going on. And then Charles has these really weird arguments that I can't, I wasn't able to get a handle on it. Because Charles has his free grace. I keep going back and forth, and Charles will sometimes get mad at me, but this is why. At first I said, he's got the most consistent. And then later, the past couple of weeks I've been like, well, you don't have a very consistent view. Because free grace actually teaches that the new covenant does have something to do with salvation, because Charles was arguing, oh, free grace has nothing to, not free, the covenant has nothing to do with salvation. I was arguing it does. And I started finding these articles from various people who started free grace, and they actually agree with me, right? So I'm like, okay, great. I did not know I was debating someone that was like very fringe in their beliefs. So no wonder I couldn't get a good handle on what they believe, because these books I'm reading about free grace, I did not know that Charles is actually teaching something outside of what they're teaching. And then, so I get kind of upset because I'm like, because Charles and his friends act like, oh, he did so good, he won the debate. Well, you also were given my presentation months in advance, whereas I had no clue how he was going to argue. Plus, I was even changing up my presentation at the last minute because he started crying about me using Daniel 9. And I started feeling like a vibe, like, is he going to pull out of the debate? So I was trying to soften that. So that threw me off, right? So I just approached the debate like, look, I'm just going to try to figure out his arguments. And I wasn't really worried about pressing him. So that's why part of the reason why I looked like I did bad. And then at that point, I started just getting overwhelmed with things, just mentally. And because I was like, told Donnie, hey, I'm going to promote this debate. I'm going to try to get 1,000 people to watch. Well, when Charles started pushing back so hard, I didn't even know how to market it. Right. So it's not like, oh, well, Chris, you're not a good promoter. No, what it is if you don't even know what you're promoting, it's like, it's hard to promote it. So that's why I was like, here, Donnie, here's $100. All right. Because I did not even know how to even promote this debate. And so it was kind of like an apology, right? Because it's like, hey, I promised this, but I also didn't know it was going to turn out like this. So I kind of want people to understand some of my thinking that was going on in that debate. And where all my burnout's coming from, because as I'm preparing for Charles, I'm also learning a lot of things about covenant theology and Christianity altogether. And to me, I think Christianity is a much more of a mess than what people want to admit. And right now, I'm just trying to figure out what is the best view, right? Like, I'm not even trying to argue. Like, I'm not approaching this like, oh, I got it all figured out. This, I'm right. No, it's like I'm approaching this as if I don't know what's true, and I'm just trying to figure out what's a good biblical starting point. And I'm just starting with the Old Testament because everything that's taught in the New Testament should be basically a commentary on the Old Testament. You're not allowed to teach something new. This isn't a new God, a new faith, a new system, new rules, new commandments. Jesus is the same God as in the Old Testament. I don't see three gods and things like that, right? I see it as one God, basically one person. I don't see, because it's like I'm not a Trinitarian, because I think I wonder if that's part of the problem too, because when I talk to people now, they'll be like, oh, no, Chris, Trinitarians believe in one God. Okay, this is my issue though, because you say there's three persons, they're all 100% God. They all have their own presence, right? Because this is in the Old Testament Hebrew. You would have to say they all have their own presence. And this was brought up by a Hebrew scholar to me. So a Hebrew scholar defending the Trinitarian doctrine. So because he thought this was going to convince me to be a Trinitarian. And at the time I was sitting on the fence. And when he brought this up, it actually pushed me off the fence into the side of I'm not sure about this doctrine anymore. And I was already starting to not be unsure about it because it started feeling very Marcion like. And I'm not saying that Marcion taught the Trinity, but I think Marcion was a development of what the kind of he's an extreme development, but I think there was something a little bit softer than Marcion kind of thinking that was going on in the culture. He's just like an extreme version of it. But I think they were already sort of making Jesus out to be like another God with his own rules and this new system. And whereas I think his crucifixion just just made the old covenant new, right? It didn't. It's kind of like if you become a new man in Christ, you are not like gone, right? It's not like, oh, that old person's just like totally gone. No, it's like you're like changed in such a way you're new, right? It's kind of like that's the way I look at the crucifixion and everything. It's like it strengthened the covenant in such a way, the old covenant in such a way it made a new covenant, right? Because the old covenant still had requirements like sacrificial, you still needed blood for atonement and everything. And so when Jesus gets crucified, you no longer that part gets taken away. But those promises made under the old covenant, if that old covenant was completely taken away and gone and replaced by a new covenant, then those promises would not be kept. But see, so what my whole argument is that old covenant is just made new by Jesus because it still has the same promises. That's why those promises are guaranteed. So, and that might be a lot for new people to quite understand. But and even for advanced people who've been studying the Bible, these concepts might be new. They're new to me, right? Because I wasn't taught this kind of stuff in a church. I wasn't taught to really view covenant theology this way in a church. So, but yeah, Melody made a good point. I agree, Chris. The simplicity is being covered over. Yeah, that's my biggest problem is I'm trying to make this more simple. I know not for right now it might be kind of complex because I'm trying to figure this out. But I'm trying to simplify everything. That's why I've tried to simplify once saved, always saved debates down to one issue. Do you believe you can apostatize and still be saved? That's basically the issue. If you do, hey, you're welcome once saved, always saved. If you don't, hey, you reject it. So that's all I'm basically trying to do is simplifying arguments. Like the dispensational versus is dispensationalism true? Well, I try to reverse it. I try to reduce it all down to talking about Daniel 9, because I feel like Daniel 9, if their interpretation of that's correct, it sets up their whole system. If it's not, their whole system falls, because so much of their system is based on all these things they imagine that's going on in it. Oh, by the way, I'm supposed to be debating Dr. George Antonios on the gospel truth. We just got to work out a time and a format, but it's basically going to be Dr. George Antonios. He's an author. He's a pastor of a church. He's been to seminary school. He actually, I think he knows the Arabic language, which helps him understand Hebrew because they're kind of similar. So, and he's wrote a book on Daniel 9. So when I debate him, it's basically, I'm not going to try to win the debate. The only thing I'm really trying to do with this debate is understand how someone is exegeting Daniel 9 to come to their conclusions. So the debate is basically going to be on what is the best exegesis of Daniel 9? What's the best process of it? So people should learn two things. They should learn about Daniel 9, how to, about how to properly interpret it. But even more importantly, you should learn an exegetical method, which I think the church lacks. I don't think churches are teaching people how to exegete the Bible correctly. And I just want to see exegesis. Like, how are you coming to these conclusions? Because every time I've had someone on my show who's written a book or they strongly believe in dispensationalism, they have not been able to really go over Daniel 9 very well. Like when I ask them to exegete it, they start jumping to all these other places, and it's like, well, you're assuming Daniel 8 is talking about Daniel 9, and you're assuming that Daniel 8 is tying into the last verse of Daniel 9, but these are all assumptions, and I think Daniel 8's already fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, but yet they'll try to tie that in, it's like, so hopefully this just starts to get narrowed down to, or if you do think they're tied together, what in the text demands that they're tied together and things like that, right? One more point, and I couldn't help but notice, and I gotta go after this, but like I was reading Revelation the other day, and in Revelation it tells him not to seal up this book, right? Let me see if I can find it. Revelation. I think it's 21. NASB. So it's like something about like, I'm pretty sure it's 21. Because I could have swore it's like maybe it's 22 I'm thinking of. Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can. Oh, yeah, my fault. Sorry. It is 22. And he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. So what's interesting is when you compare that to Daniel 8, let's use the NASB versions of this. So we see that time is near, right? Do not seal it up, for the time is near. I think it's the visions of the evening mornings, which has been told is true. But as for you, keep the vision secret, because it pertains to many days in the future. So, or it says like keep the vision sealed. All right, in a lot of versions, I didn't know NASB would say keep it secret because it pertains to many days in the future. So, what's interesting to me is Revelation says don't seal it, and I kind of because it's going to be it's coming shortly. This one says it refers to many days in the future, so seal it, right? Well, what's interesting is when you look at that this word right here, Kazan. Hold on, let me show you something in the interlinear. Interlinear Daniel 8:26. And Seventh Day Adventists should know this too. Hazon, right? This word vision, Hazon. That means it's going to refer to all of it. The mare would just be like a certain part of the vision, but like the kazan would be the whole entire vision. So now when Daniel receives this vision, it's about 540 BC, not 540. It's about 550 BC, somewhere around 550, 545 BC. I can't quite remember without looking at the beginning of the page. And plus, I just don't have these times right off the top of my head. But it's somewhere around like, 545 BC, right? So he receives this vision. Well, we know because this tells us plainly that Media Persia is conquered by Greece, because it says there's this ram and then there's this goat that conquers it, and it tells you in the prophecy the ram is Media Persia and the goat is Greece. So, but that's only how many, about 210 years away from when Daniel gets this vision, right? So and the angel says, seal up this vision because it's not for many days. Well, that's only 210 years away. In Revelation, it says don't seal it up because these things are to come shortly. And I did look this up. Like, in fact, I mean, I could ask the AI in a new chat. Kazon in Daniel 8:26 refers to the entire vision, right? Let's see here. First, to the entire vision from the goat conquering the ram all the way to the end. Okay, because this is what I thought. So yes, Kazon and Daniel 8 refers to the entire vision, not just the 2,300 evening morning segment. So Kazon refers to the full prophetic vision. Mare specifically to the appearance segment, the 2,300 evening morning part. So that's what I'm saying. Like that Hebrew word specifically for vision, kazon, that's referring to the entire vision. It says seal it up for it's not for many days. Well, that's only 210 years from when Daniel gets this vision. That's quite a contrast from Revelation 22 when it says in verse 10, so Revelation 22 verse 10, and he said to me, do not seal up the words of this prophecy of this book, for the time is near. All right. So I just thought I'd point that out to people, because now if you want to say that that's somehow like like Revelation is like real far off in the future, like to me, this is why I'm kind of open-minded to a different interpretation of Revelation just based off that alone. But all I know is if not if one, that one in Daniel 8 is not for many days and it was sealed up because it's 210 years away. The one in Revelation has to be a lot closer. So just a thought. I'm not saying I know how to interpret Revelation. I'm just saying just based off of that. And I don't think you can have, I don't know, like I think there's a lot of other contradictions if you try to push the prophecy in Daniel 8 a lot further. I noticed some other things in the Greek, but I got to get going. I got to get ready for work. So hopefully people learned something, made the show a little interesting. I know I threw a lot of different stuff out there. And thanks for watching.